Good evening, everybody. It's so great to see so many of you out and about. I love it. Well, tonight we have the pleasure of hearing from Rod Lehnertz, who is one of our very own residents' son, Pat's son.
And future resident.
Yeah, and future resident. There you go. And he's going to be talking about the 10-year plan at the University of Iowa. So please help me welcome Rod.
Thank you. I want to make sure, can you hear me with this? Sound all right? Anybody not hear me with it? I can turn the volume up. Most of the people probably don't want me to turn the volume up. But I will. Does that sound better? Sound all right? Even louder? No, sorry. It's a tough crowd. Okay, let's go with that. If you get tired of my voice, I'll turn it down as we go. First of all, thanks for having me. I was asked if I might come and give an update from the University of Iowa. Again, my name is Rod Lehnertz, son of Pat Lehnertz, born and raised in Iowa City, and I've had the honor for the last 28 years to be part of the University of Iowa family. My roles at the University of Iowa have been varied. As a couple of us were talking about it, I was a project manager. I came here 28 years ago as an architect and managed projects for the university, then directed that office as the university architect, only the fourth university architect in the history of our campus. And for the last 8 years have held the role as senior vice president for finance and operations. Many of you, or all of you, may have known Doug True. I still do. Doug still plays golf better than I do. But when he retired, I was asked to fill that role, and because of my heart being with architecture, I did make them let me keep doing the architecture. So I remain university architect as well. And it's a full plate, but it gives me more energy than it takes from me. So with all of that being said, I'm also, you get hobbies. I'm also the voice of Iowa Hawkeye Wrestling at Carver Hawkeye Arena. So the wrestling team is doing all right. Friday, Nebraska, I will lose my voice again. Each duel, I lose my voice at the end of it. It's hard to cheer that loud. But today, for the next, we'll see. I'll make this as quick as we need to because I want to leave time for questions, and they can be about anything, including wrestling. We're going to talk about a 10-year plan at the University of Iowa. Now, it's going to look like a ton of work, and it is a ton of work. However, historically, in working with the Board of Regents, we've communicated our plans on an annual basis to them. And even when I was directing design and construction at the university 8 years ago and further back, we were doing about $100 million worth of construction on the main campus. Hospital was doing between $30 and $40 million a year on the hospital portion of our campus. I can tell you one of the things you're going to see that is flipped. We're doing about twice as much and are planning about twice as much for the hospital as the main campus. But when I mentioned the $100 million a year, what I'm going to show you from the general education, from the university non-hospital side, it equates, over a decade, equates to about $60 million. So in fact, a decade after we were doing $100 million a year, this is going to show you less. It's going to look like a lot. Because for the first time, the Board of Regents last January asked us to present to them our 10-year plan as one whole plan for both the hospital and the main campus. And it was a breath of fresh air for us because we were already thinking in those terms. Now we were going to communicate it. We were going to tell them our story, and they, by virtue of that, have given us authority to advance those projects. And it's a better partnership with our Board of Regents than we've had for really many years. And so what I'm going to show you is what we communicated to them, but it happens fast. There are developments on all of these. Every page is going to give me a chance to give you an update on them. And so I will. If you have questions, raise your hand. And then we'll spend some time at the end if you have questions as well. This isn't intended to intimidate with all those circles, but you can see the aerial generally of our campus. And our calling card for all of this, renew, right size, and improve. One of the truths, especially on the main campus, is it's not about building a bunch of new shiny buildings. Now, we went through a period where we were building a lot of buildings, and then the aftermath of the flood of 2008, we were moved to and forced to build new buildings. What you're going to see here, if you watch it carefully, is most of the work on the main campus is about taking care of the buildings we have and addressing that issue as opposed to growth. We've been planning over the last 5 years for how the right sizing of our campus. We've really, in some places, overbuilt and left buildings that were antiquated or not up to date to sort of survive and cost us a great deal of money on an annual basis, whether it be care or energy, those kinds of things. So it's a combination of getting to a right size and improving these existing buildings. That's not to say there isn't some new stuff, because you're going to see some stuff, especially with the hospital. I'll talk about these, and I'm going to start with, I need to stay out of your way. I'm going to start with the Pentecrest. It is our top priority. The institution's top priority to our state and to the Board of Regents is the care of our Pentecrest. You can see in the lower left-hand corner the aerial of the Pentecrest, and the number 1 is on McLean. It is the first of the 3 modernizations we intend to do. McLean, followed by Jessup Hall, followed by McBride. Of course, Schaefer Hall was finished it was 1998, but the building still stands almost as though it's new when we gutted it and historically, carefully renovated and modernized that building, and it still works very well. But these 3 buildings have had almost no improvement or modernization since they were built. And they're all either approaching or past 100 years of age. And this is the quintessential core of our campus, and it is our top responsibility and priority to protect it for the long haul. So we've made very clear to the state that we want to do this, and that we want the Pentecrest to become dedicated to the students of the University of Iowa. That impacts me and a president and some other folks. But the idea behind this is to start with McLean when we start getting a partnership of funding with the state of Iowa. We're asking them each year for that support. And as we do it, it will start a chain primarily with Jessup Hall, which is where the president's office is and university administration. In this plan, what we will do is, you can see 2 other buildings I'm mentioning, and you see it in the upper right-hand corner. The art building, the original 1936 art building, which has been mothballed for almost, 15 years now. And that was in partnership with the federal government after the flood of 2008. They protected it. They dedicated it as too historic to remove. They were absolutely right. In fact, we were telling them that. And we went through a project with them to rehabilitate that building at some point in the future. Now is the time for that. And that will enable, you can also see Gilmore Hall, built in 1910, our College of Law building at that time. It hosts a number of units, and some of them are already moving. The units associated with research support are moving to where the heart of our research is. NIH research is on the health science campus. We're beginning to empty that building, and Gilmore Hall will become the home of university administration. So we will move university administration, the vice president's offices, and the provost and the president to Gilmore Hall. And to make way for that, primarily the graduate college will move to the original art building. We've been working with these units. The programming is going on with this, and it's been very positive. But all of this relies on the state to snap their fingers and say they're ready to partner with us with funds. Now, the last time they did that, we every once in a while have a facetious feel for that. Will that ever happen? The last time the state funded for us, it was the largest funding on their part in the history of the university, $64 million to the new pharmacy building. And they daisy-chained their funding to us, but we've now completed that project. And for the last couple of years, we've been saying it's time. Now, there are all kinds of political reasons that they're hesitating. One of those, believe it or not, is that Nebraska is legalizing gambling. And the state's funding for many of these projects like pharmacy have been from gambling proceeds. And they're stuttering to see what happens when Nebraska starts, in the Omaha area especially, starts taking from revenues from the state of Iowa. Now, their casinos are not allowing smoking, so I doubt anybody's going over there, because ours do allow smoking. But we'll see. We're watching, and we're getting signs that there's been, and I give our president, Barb Wilson, a lot of credit, a remarkable improvement in our relations with our state government. You know, we are a Republican-dominated Des Moines, and that often hurts the University of Iowa financing and our relationships there. She and we have done a lot of work to reach out to those folks, partner, or at least listen openly to them about their concerns. And our relations have been fairly effective in these last couple of years, which is why we're fairly optimistic, whether or not it'll be this year or not. We're getting closer to this happening. And by the way, part of the reason it helps is that we know they're going to fund some stuff at Iowa State, and sometimes when that happens, we get dragged behind. So, but it's caring for our campus. It's not brand new big buildings. It's all rehabilitation of meaningful buildings on our campus. Next up, some more buildings that are old and need work. I'll start with the Iowa Memorial Union, which you see right here. Built originally in 1925. It was one of the first student unions in the country. It was a new thing back at that period of time, and we're very proud of it. As many of you know, it was built onto in the 50s when they ruined its architecture, and we've tried to fix some things since then. But you may recall the Campus Recreation and Wellness Center in 2010. That happened because of students stepping up and saying we need a better recreation, and they paid through a student fee program to pay off that project. The same thing is going to happen here. Our students have already voted and have decided to advance a project based on student fees in the future to renovate and rehabilitate the Iowa Memorial Union. So that in this slide stands as its own. Now, a couple of related projects. Right there in the middle is a picture of the worst parking ramp in the world, which is the Iowa Memorial Union parking ramp. If you have an SUV, it has a spiral thing, and you can't make it with modern cars, so you have to kind of back forward to get up there. And it is the first place that visitors to the university, families and prospective students, that's their introduction to the University of Iowa. And so we've known a long time we need to replace that, but we can't. It doesn't have the footprint. We could tear it down, and we wouldn't have the footprint to fix it. You start to tie these things together. Next to it is Halsey Hall, the women's gymnasium, 1919 building. It is current host to our dance department, one of the arts departments that is not on our arts campus, and it is an inaccessible building. In fact, during COVID, we shut the building down. It doesn't have effective enough air passage for the systems. We had to shut that building down for safety purposes. It's not long for this world. The building is really problematic for the dance department. Interestingly enough, at the top is the Museum of Art, 1969, the first building on our campus that brought internationally renowned architecture to our campus. Max Abramovitz designed building. It obviously can't be a museum anymore, and we now, I hope all of you have visited or plan to, our new Stanley Museum of Art. But FEMA did recover that building, recognizing it couldn't become a museum again. And so we went through a reprogramming effort, and it turns out that the high volumes, no columns, and big spaces that are needed for a museum are just what you would need for a dance studio, and in fact the same number of major galleries as there are dance studios in Halsey Hall. And so our plan with College of Liberal Arts and Sciences and the dance department is to move dance right next to the theater building, right in the heart of the arts campus, and give them a modern, expressive building, and then allow us a footprint that can build a parking ramp for visitors to the core of the campus and all of the things we'd expect for the Iowa Memorial Union. So it ties a lot of these together. Our planning over this last 5 years has tried to pull all of those dominoes into a way to execute them creatively and have a better campus, especially at the core of the campus.
So are you planning to tear down the old ramp floor and build up by Halsey, all one ramp? Or?
Yeah, the idea, when Halsey would be gone, we would take the IMU ramp down, and the IMU ramp would occupy, now when I say occupy, would occupy the footprint of both, but we would be very sensitive to what would happen along the Pentecrest face. Because of the importance of the visual context there, there's been talk of us possibly putting some office support. Now, that changes because of this whole future of work post-COVID world, whose who's working on campus and who isn't. But we know that we'll have programming when this comes together that will allow us to be very sensitive to the architecture as it faces the Pentecrest. That's a very historically important thing for us to do, regardless what kind of building type it is. It's a good question. Staying on the east side and mentioning a project I talk about not having many new buildings, there is one exception out of our 12 colleges. Only one college in our current master planning says it must grow, and that's our Tippie College of Business. The Papa John Business Building, built in the 1990s, we have doubled the number of programs and students since that building was built. We have faculty sharing offices. Not that faculty can't share offices, but we do have that, and it's not recruitable and it's not sustainable. We have an entrepreneurial program that's one of the top in the country and bursting at the seams, not just for business students, for students from all of our colleges, and we don't have enough space for them to excel. And so the idea, and it would be primarily gift-oriented, would be to grow the Papa John building across the street on Clinton. You can see in the image here, the plan. This is the Papa John Business Building. Here's the Pentecrest. Papa John Business Building and two properties across the street from each other on Clinton Street and Market. Where we are aiming for the College of Business is directly across the street on Clinton Street. And the one north of it, which you can see in the upper left, is Fred Riddle's property. If anybody, when I was a little kid, he was my dentist. I don't know how a guy, he has the record for the most touchdown passes in the game. A guy who has fingers that are this long and this big could be a dentist, but he is. And he gifted that property to us at a vastly discounted cost, probably 8-9 years ago. And he has continued to operate the building, but we have the option to take final occupation of that site when the development occurs. And as it says, our intent there would be to possibly, carefully, not automatically, but look at that as a returning student residence hall. We have enough residence hall capacity for our first-year students. We don't have enough for returning students that want to be on campus. We have statistics in admissions and in our student life that show the longer and the more students are engaged in a community and in a residence hall, the higher retention they have, which is a key factor in our ranking nationally and in our revenue. If they leave, not only do they go home to say that higher education is lousy, we stop getting any money from them. So it's good to keep them in. And second-year students, there's a high risk with second-year students heading off to an apartment that's just packed full of Budweiser. And so that is a site that is within the neighborhood of residence halls. The challenge is we don't have any residence halls that are designed for returning students, this sort of suite style where you get a single room and have a community. They're all double-loaded corridors with 2 roommates on each side of the hallway. And that's a first-year student, when we look at all of our peer institutions, a first-year student treatment. And so we see that as a site in the future that can work that way. And we thank Fred Riddle for his generosity to the university to make that possible. 2 big buildings. Our largest building on our campus, the main library, it's the largest building on the University of Iowa campus, 1951. Has had few upgrades. Now, it did have one major upgrade on the first floor. We put electronic commons, about a half of the first floor. When we did that, the annual visitorship, we did it about 10 years ago. The annual visitorship to the main library jumped from 200,000 visitors a year to 1.2 million visitors a year. It completely changed the building from the student's perspective. A cool place to go 24 hours, a cafe called Food for Thought, a cafe in there. You know, I don't remember being allowed to have any food in those horrible stacks that I had to, and wooden chairs that I had to study in, but they flocked to it. And it's only 1/2 of 1 floor on that building. The rest of it, we have special collections. We have some pretty incredible maps, and thanks to HD, and women's studies, and the small books collection, these things that are Tom Brokaw's collection, are all in a place that are at risk if we don't modernize appropriately. I can tell you this was top on our list with the state of Iowa for the #1 project we were aiming at funding for, and then a resounding response came back from the state legislature. We will never give you any money for a library. Libraries aren't important. And I think Yeah, that was our reaction. But I think the way a lot of legislators were looking at it is this little library in their community that had a kids reading section, and that was for babysitting. That's about it. We know a university library is completely different. It's about research, it's about teaming and engagement. So we're not going to get state funds for this. We have to find our way to fund this, and we're putting together a package of individual quadrants of the building, starting with special collections and the HVAC systems that will make sure the collections within it are taken care of. To prepare for that, we did on the east side of Iowa City, we have a big refrigerator that can take 5 million volumes, and we can begin to decompress the library by taking volumes there, and within 1 day that system has computers that can pick these books out. A lot of universities do it now. And when somebody requests a book, they can get it within a 24-hour period, but it doesn't have to be on the core of the campus. Those stacks that we all remember can turn into these teaming spaces, virtual learning spaces, research spaces for students. Primarily, the way we're planning for our students is the IMU is the social space for the students. The library is the academic space for the students. And the UCC is the transactional or service space for the students as we look at 3 major student service parts of our campus. So the University Capital Center, built in 1978, part of the urban renewal in Iowa City. We are now 62% owners of that mall. The second floor is owned by the university. We have rights. In 2024, 2025, we have rights to buy the balance of the building. It sits right across the street from the Pennant Crest in an ever-urbanizing campus, and it makes all the sense in the world, especially with our planning, to execute that purchase. The outboard side that has the retail and the restaurants, we would keep. The students want that, and it works for both Iowa City, downtown Iowa City, and for the students. But we will continue to modernize the balance of the building for all of the services taking care of the students. They're transactional, all of the business services they do, the cards, the IDs, the international programs, DEI services, student disability services, our police. All these things are coming together as a service quadrant for the University of Iowa students right across the street from the Pennant Crest. So that will be something you can look for. You'll see it in the news and others. In 2024 and 2025, we have the right with the Hodge Group to buy the balance of that building. This one's got a lot of moving pictures, but I'm going to start with one that is already underway. The Hardin Library. I mentioned how the face of libraries are changing. We're not getting rid of libraries, but we're using them in new ways, and we talk about the importance of research and research support. We're growing in research at a clip of about 2% a year, and pretty remarkable. We're really seeing diversification of our research and success in research, and quite a bit of momentum on that front. But that project, the Hardin Library, which is for the health sciences, is now being renovated to improve the library portion, but also convert part of it to research support. And so we're in the middle of renovations to that portion of the building right now. And what it will allow us to do, if you go up Grand Avenue, if you're driving toward the field house and you look to your left, you'll see some old houses up what's called Grand Avenue Court. 4 of those they're houses, but they've been for decades laboratories with fume hoods and other things. It's not where you would normally put those, but that's where our health and safety for research have been hosted because they didn't really have a home. Now they're going to have a home in the Hardin Library for the health sciences, and we're going to be able to take those houses down. And I'm going to show you in a little bit why that's important as we look at the hospital development and other work going on. There are some neighbors next to that, which are our cultural centers. We have 4 cultural centers on our campus, and they're all in that pocket of the campus. And by beginning to remove the outdated, antiquated, and really obsolete functioning houses on that site, we're going to free up Grand Avenue Court. I'll talk in a minute about what we'll do there. And then we're going to take the cultural centers and we're going to put them on the far west, southwest corner of Hubbard Park. Now, I can tell you, as I was developing this campus 15 years ago, I'd say, hands off Hubbard Park. It's sanctified. You can't do anything there. But what we have learned is that it is vastly underutilized, especially on the west side. We do about 100 events there a year. We could do more. But student life has indicated that in a plan like this, every one of the things that we have hosted on Hubbard Park can happen on the east face. Here's the Union's up here, and this is Madison Street. Can happen on the east side of this. And as we come over to the less used side, we would take modernized cultural centers and bring them together near the Union, where all of our cultural center support is, but also give a front door for this, bringing all of these events to the university campus. We actually, and our president, fully believes this is going to put our president's presidency on the map nationally, because in an era where DEI has become more and more important, we're not trying to find a way to brush it under the rug. We're trying to find a way to highlight it and make it something for all of the students on our campus. And so it's very exciting. It'll be a gift fundraise project. So we're already beginning the work to raise funds for these houses that will be together and utilizing part of Hubbard, but then both of these becoming event spaces at the Union and at Hubbard Park. And fittingly, Hubbard Park is named after Philip Hubbard, the first black vice president in the history of the Big Ten. And in fact, after the 2008 flood, when this building, the Union, was under 4 feet of water, with water coming up from underneath, when we began to reconnect this, we had to take utility lines through here, and we came across a historic dig find, an archaeological find. It stopped the project because it was a federally funded project, brought the state archaeologist in. Very ballyhooed dig started to occur. And what we found through the digs that didn't just happen here, they happened throughout Hubbard, was this is called Plot 98, and the original before Iowa City was Iowa City. This was the first development, right about here, split two things. This half was the first Irish immigrant neighborhood in Iowa City, and this half was the first black neighborhood in Iowa City. They were both together on that site, and many of them were the craftspeople who built the old Capitol in 1842. To take those facts and to say this is where we're going to take the cultural centers of the African American house, the Latino and Native American house, our Pride house, and our Pan-Pacific and Asian house, bring them together and have all of the Union circulating around that is a drive of our student life and of our president. And we're just a good fundraising project away from making it happen. So, next, right-sizing our campus. Now, this may end up upsetting a couple of you. In our efforts to be stewards on this campus, I mentioned our planning has shown that we are overbuilt as a campus. We have empty spaces. Not enough residence hall space, but we have enough academic space, classroom space. Sometimes it's the form of those that are changing, but we have enough space. You'll recall, maybe poignantly, I don't know, we took down Seashore Hall. Seashore Hall was a wood frame, so I had to answer a lot of questions about that. So it was 1899, it was our first it was University of Iowa Hospitals and Clinics in 1899. It was wood framed. We had already decommissioned 2 floors of that building because of decades-long termite damage for structural concerns. There were all kinds of reasons it didn't work. One of the things it did do is it revealed a park that is there now if you happened on that footprint. That's an important little park. That park is where the University of Iowa began. On that site was an old building called Mechanics Hall. It wasn't Hall, Mechanics... Somebody's going to know before I do. Academy. Thank you. The Mechanics Academy. It was not a university building, but they built it for learning, and the University of Iowa had no place to teach. So it became our first classroom building. Our first classes were on that site. And it lasted until it was time for a hospital on that site, because when we were working with St. Mary's, there wasn't enough medical help in Iowa City, so it was decided there would be a hospital on that site. The foundation of Seashore was built with the rubble of the Mechanics Academy. And so on that park is the site of the very beginning of the university, so something to celebrate even as Seashore isn't there. We removed about 200,000 square feet from our campus of antiquated, underutilized, very expensive, and from a utilities perspective, very wasteful buildings. and didn't lose any function because we were starting to, if you will, that Tetris game. We were starting to find the places for people to go most appropriately. This is the next step in that. We have long been looking after West Lawn. Built in 1919, nurses' dormitory. My grandmother, who graduated from nursing in 1942, was a resident in that residence hall. And it had its day, but it is now a mishmash of things from a daycare for the hospital. We have student health there, but student health is very undernourished. They're very undersized and invisible to most of our students. We have been carefully emptying the building over time while the roof keeps failing and leaks are happening, in fortunately places that aren't often occupied. And the intent in the long term, because of its proximity on the heart of the health science campus, is for it to offer two things: health science research, and also an option for us to grow nursing. You all know there's no more need in the state of Iowa or nationally for nurses. We now have one of the top 10 nursing programs in the country, which we are very proud of. But there are not enough nurses. The only way, even if and when we figure out how to actually fund nursing faculty to the numbers that work, we do not have the physical structure to add more students at the University of Iowa. And the nursing building is landlocked until West Lawn would not be there. The southern wing of any replacement will likely include nursing additions. So that's what's happening here. The beloved, we're not tearing this down, the beloved Jefferson building, our only skyscraper until Mark Moen showed up, was a little story. I brought my now wife, came here for her first visit to Iowa City. She was from San Francisco. And we pulled up at this intersection that used to be lit. Now we're going backwards. It's a stop sign. And she said, "So where's the city?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She said, "Well, it's called Iowa City. Where are the big buildings?" And I said, and I just pointed. And I said, there's the big building. And before the light turned green, she said, "I could never live here." So 29 years later, she's still living here and loves it. But this building has been, all but the first floor has been owned by the university and our facilities court for years and decades. And we put a mishmash of units in there over the years. We've been approached on occasion. Now, we all know there have been a lot of hotels built in Iowa and Iowa City area. But we've been approached by some who have talked about wanting to make it a boutique, bring it back classics, valet parked kind of, as it was when it was the Jefferson in 1912. And we won't give this up to anybody unless they have commitments to revive it and to keep it and save it and protect it. But we won't, with the future of work and with our transactional balancing of remote and hybrid office function uses, our target is we won't need this building anymore. It is expensive for us to operate. We're underutilizing it. And if we can get it to the right people, we give it away. We don't have to sell it for money. We want it to be protected. And it will cost a lot to fix it, so we probably can't sell it. We'll probably have to give it away. But at some point, it is a building we look at as a litmus test for our being efficient in the transactional parts of our business, which are a lot of units that report to me. So as you look at that list, it has those. I already talked about the houses and about Halsey Hall. When you look at that, that alone is about 250,000 square feet. It wouldn't, if we get to where we are, it wouldn't impact our quality at all. It would lower our costs quite a bit. But then instead of having a crenellated wall that prevents the health sciences from being a part of the main campus, to build, as is suggested in the bars you see, to build something that is more transparent and sees views of the east side of the river, the Pennacrest, the old capital, the river basin. I think there's great potential on that site. In the future, there's no immediate plan. You'll know there's no immediate plan for us to do it. And we're not tearing down West Lawn tomorrow. But we are working on, as you saw in the IMU, we're moving student health into the IMU where the students are. That will be a step in that process.
Just the clinics I presume.
Yes, correct. Okay, I'll just use this since it doesn't seem to. Maybe. I've got an Oatnell enter password. I'm going to assume I really don't have to enter any password on this. Let me, what happens if I do that? Well, let's try that. I'll just go to that button each time. Thanks, Lindsay. So the next one, athletics. Everybody always wants to know about athletics. I do too. These are projects that are all based on gifting. It is one of our auxiliaries. We have the General Education Fund, is how we run and operate a university. That's tuition and the state dollars coming in to help subvent the tuition, and that's how we pay for our faculty, how we care for our buildings, how we teach our students. The series of auxiliaries that include the hospital, that include athletics, include housing and dining, have to sit on their own bottom. And they have to operate based on what their business is. In athletics, all of their plan is based on gifting for these projects. We're already seeing the Goschke family wrestling facility. If you've been by Carver Hawkeye Arena, big mess over there, progress. We're building a $30 million wrestling facility on the south end of Carver Hawkeye Arena. In driving that architecture, we're very careful, and a headache to the architects. It does not extend, it goes down, it does not extend higher than the brow of Carver Hawkeye Arena. That building, Carver Hawkeye Arena, was the first National Design Award-winning building on our campus, and we intend to keep it that way. And it will not lose that designation, but the remarkable roof structure and the way the building was designed and looks, we intend to protect even with additions that help the athletic department to succeed. So the building will be positioned and scaled at a level that will keep the architecture of the original Carver Hawkeye Arena the highest priority. There will be for those who are mobility concerned, there will be a tunnel, a new tunnel for the wrestling team to go out on the floor, but also a second way for people to go from the floor up. If you've ever tried to get out of a full Carver Hawkeye Arena, it's about an hour wait in the basketball tunnel elevator. So this will be a second way up once that's done. It'll be finished in the late winter, early spring of 2024, but effectively for their 2025 season, which by the way means it will also include women's wrestling, which is now starting as the program, and the building was designed to host both. The other ones are future projects. Gymnastics and field hockey out at the Hawkeye campus, or our west campus, west of Finkbine. We have a master plan for development for athletics. They're trying to pool, again, trying means if you get the gifts over time to do it, you can do it. If you will, the Olympic sports out on the Hawkeye campus. We have many of those out there already, but the idea of gymnastics, which is in very outdated space in the field house, has a lead donor. We already have a donor who has committed $5 million to the project, which is on a national level pretty remarkable. And that is, as part of that master plan, this is where the gymnastics building will go. If you were out there here, this is the sports clinic, if you've been out on the Hawkeye campus. So it's sort of next door to that. Additionally, on the field hockey pitch that we have donors that are coming together to create a press box team locker space out there for them. We just finished one of those for the soccer team, and also a gifted project, so that will be advanced as well. And then you can see baseball. They're a very successful baseball team. We don't have a Major League Baseball team here, so each spring we actually have trouble getting everybody into that stadium. It's very popular. We happen to be very good, which is a good thing. The athletic department has already raised, grassroots effort has already raised more than $20 million for a new baseball stadium on that footprint. It wouldn't be brand new, but it would be a new press box and bleacher system for the baseball team, based on donations to baseball. Who knew? And then they'll continue to look. One of the things you can look for, Carver Hawkeye Arena, as wonderful as it is, was built in 1983, just ahead of ADA and all of the things that we come to expect in a welcoming, accessible environment. And you all know it's difficult. You're either up or you're down. We also know, and you just have to go to these exciting games we're having. It's tough to fill an arena these days. Students find other things to do. And we're not just seeing it here. In fact, we're outdrawing most of our peers. The athletic department's going to be studying the notion of slightly reducing the capacity of the arena and adding more premium seating. Nationally, the premium options for clubs or suites and those kinds of things, there is still a line out the window or out the door for people wanting that. not so much for the ticket just going through the door because of all of these TV contracts and these odd times they play games and all of those things. It's become almost easier to watch it on TV. And so they're trying to look at this now. That'll be another thing that would be a gift-supported project and revenue-supported project if and when it would go forward. Oh, clicker worked again. All right, some additional things. When we presented to the Board of Regents, we had to have a catch-all area because we want to make sure we didn't get into granular detail but allowed us some opportunities to tell the board where we were headed. And they include, and you can see some 1s and some 2s, 3s up there. It includes East and West Campus research growth and modernization. I already talked about our growth and our success. We got a $115 million grant from FEMA, the largest grant FEMA has ever given. They've actually designated us as a favored researcher for FEMA. They, I said FEMA, I'm sorry, for, shoot, who's the space people? Thank you, NASA. I got FEMA on my brain for the last 20 years. But NASA has exacting expectations for research being done. And Van Allen Hall is a great building. Well, it's a great name. It's not a great building. And it is an aging building. We have to find a way to modernize it. We're not going to tear it down. It's a giant. But we need to modernize it and other research buildings as we diversify our research holdings and not just NIH. And that's what's happening with Marty Schultz, our Vice President for Research, is really spreading it out. You can see some of the places that we're talking about doing this. CAMBUS, parking and campus services, always a challenge for us. We're seeing more need for CAMBUS than ever. You've seen Iowa City's been doing what they call road diets, which is good for pedestrians, narrowing the streets. Today, as compared to 4 years ago, it sounds like a small number, it takes about 7 minutes longer for the blue route or red route bus that goes clockwise or counterclockwise around our campus to get around. Things are getting tighter, it's more traffic, and we have, with the hospital, they're also attending to the commuters, the nurses and others, and there's an overload in that. And buses are not simple. It takes 2 to 3 years to get a bus. It takes $500,000 to get a bus, and then you have to have the space, the storage space. So we're working with parking and transportation on new and innovative ways to do that, and our campus services. And then housing, care, and modernization. I mentioned some of that already with where we are on our campus and trying to look after recruiting students, but also keeping them here and having returning students taken care of on our campus. So I'm going to zoom in at the end of this on University of Iowa hospitals and clinics. As I mentioned, doing about $60 million a year over a 10-year period for the main campus and about $120 million a year if you extrapolate it for 10 years for the hospital. And this is primarily where this is happening. Start with the Jacobson Inpatient Bed Tower project, which would be right here. Here you see the hospital, the Children's Hospital for reference here, Kinnick Stadium here. It would be this, and this is a modernization of the face of the building. They're connecting these two towers. Jacobson has already dedicated the largest gift in the history of the university to the project. The Jacobson Foundation has $70 million gift to the project, and we are beginning programming on this. As you can see, our intent is that it would start construction in 2025 through roughly 2029. That's primarily because of the enabling projects I'm going to talk about. You don't build a tower of that scale and land it gently. It's landing right on a bunch of stuff. And we saw the same thing with the Children's Hospital when we did it. We had a lot of relocation and enabling projects. I did mention earlier research. I talked about the West Lawn site. There's also the MEB, Medical Education Building site. It is a very outdated building. It has a nearly top-rated PT program, physical therapy program in the building. We have a lot of potential both for growth and for better research at that location. So these are two future options as we look at health science research in the very core of the health science campus. And then the enabling projects for the tower. They start with a parking ramp. The world goes around parking. It says money makes the world, parking makes the world go around. This site is going to take out old hospital ramp number 1. And so this will more than replace it, about a 900 space parking ramp. Here's that West Campus Transportation Center. So it will take the southern end of this parking lot and will be a new parking ramp. We're late in design on this. We're actually fast-tracking all of these projects to make that 2025 date work for the tower project. This is lot 14 next to the Athletic Learning Center across the street from the field house. That will be a new health sciences academic building. Speech and hearing is getting landed upon, and we have a renowned speech and hearing program. They're ecstatic about this. As you can imagine, it's good to be a victim every once in a while. They're going to get a brand new building. And it's about time for a program that's growing and a program that's very successful, but we're kind of taking 3 birds with 1 stone on this. The site is of about that size, and it's not taking the whole site, but we're going to occupy a good part of this because we are going to at least start getting ourselves ready for research space, where I mentioned it, by taking physical therapy and putting them in this building as well. And part of the reason is because they work a lot with health and human physiology, who exist in the field house. Health and human physiology is the fastest growing program at the University of Iowa, and increasingly riding its rankings and a priority of the president and the provost. By bringing those 3 programs, 3 related programs together in one modern academic building for 3 ranked programs, we think there will be a lot of gravity in that, and it will free up opportunities for, and this question was asked earlier, will the field house come down? The first plan for the hospital was, and we presented it to the board, they would put a major ambulatory facility, $800 million ambulatory facility on this site. Now this was all professed by a CEO who is no longer at the University of Iowa, Suresh Gunasekaran. I loved working with Suresh, he was great, but he's in San Francisco now. This plan didn't account for the fact that it takes about $100 million to take down the field house. There's recreation, there's academic, all kinds of things happening in that building. It's not as simple as just removing it. And there were questions about whether ambulatory should come back into the center of campus when we've seen the success of, for instance, IRL, Iowa River Landing, and reaching out to the community for the ambulatory services. So that's on hold for now, and in fact that's drawn as it was in January when we considered that a program. But by having HHP get out, we have the opportunity to modernize that for recreation, for student life, to have, because the campus recreation facility on Burlington is only about half of the need for our recreation needs. So we will do modernization, student life over time in the building. Don't look for that thing to come down while I'm around. Not that I'm going to fight it, it just won't happen. And then the final enabling project is combined with this. I mentioned those houses that we're taking out, the cultural houses and those lab houses. This will allow us to create surface parking that is a hold for some decade in the future if you'd ever want another residence hall there. We don't need one there now, but we master plan based on the people who hold my job well past me holding the job and not painting us into a corner. Additionally, we looked, because this is taking about 200 parking spaces off our campus because the building's landing on a parking lot. We looked at putting parking underneath the building and in the building. The premium on this building for putting that parking in is about $19 million. And by taking those houses out, enabling the cultural centers to go to Hubbard, we can replace all of that parking there and save about $13 million on the project. And so that is our planning for this, and all of these are aimed at completing and making the moves happen so that this can start in 2025. I'll stop there. I don't know what time it is. Whew. All right, we got a minute for questions. Yes, please.
The last slide showed that new parking area.
Yes.
But that's a very steep hill.
Yeah. It will be done terraced. It will be terraced in 2 halves. Very good point. Grand Avenue Port goes from Melrose down too. So what we would be doing is building, in fact, in 2 phases. The research facilities could come out first anyway, and so we'll be able to build about 100 spaces there on one terrace, and when the cultural centers come out, we build the balance on another terrace, and that will, in effect, replace the parking. And these units, it's not just replacing parking. These have patients. When you're talking about speech and hearing and PT and the things that we need to have patients, not just visitors. Please.
If you're doing stuff, back to the very first, if you're doing stuff come to Jessup,
Yes.
and moving administration over to Gilmore, what's going to happen to Jessup?
Yeah, good point. Thank you. So,
Repeat the question, please.
yes, absolutely. So the question was, you're going to make those moves on the Pentecrest, and administration's going to move over to Gilmore. What's happening with Jessup? So right now, McLean Hall hosts computer science and mathematics. Computer science is incredibly fast, and if you've noticed our governor, she's also pinned computer science as one of these hireable programs in the state of Iowa for citizens of Iowa. So it's an easy sell, especially at the first phase, to have that building, McLean, become our center for computer science. And we will modernize, it's an ancient looking building, but we will modernize the interior. Right now it is worse than high school computer science labs. And so we'll modernize that building for that. And ultimately, both in the interim and finally, if you remember that map, Jessup will work for a combination of mathematics and also social sciences. And so we'll bring more social sciences, liberal arts. It'll be still all liberal arts and sciences program, but it'll be social sciences and mathematics in Jessup Hall.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. Please.
So if you're moving things down by the river, what plans are you making for floods?
John, what floods? John. Yeah, it's a great question. Well, one of the things the question was, what about future floods? I'll be the last guy. We all know in our planning, we're saying, don't plan for that last flood. Plan for the next flood. And we've done a lot on the campus, and that's not to have rose-colored glasses in this, but for instance, one little thing we did was all of the walkways on both sides of the river on our campus now are designed. They used to be like this, and it killed us in 2008. They're now all built to the 100-year flood level, plus there's a certain number of inches above that they're built to, and they're built not as sidewalks but as roadways so that we can use HESCO barriers when it gets really bad. We had none of those protections before, nor did we have protected tunnel systems, which became routes for the water underneath. We now have cordoned off tunnel systems that were done right after the flood. That doesn't solve every problem, and you'll notice most of what I've talked about has been up on the bluff. We are going to be very careful about any development we would do in the river basin, any future. I mean, I don't mean to reveal my cards. I'd love it if EPB would float down the river. It's a tough building for us, but it's a stout one. It didn't seem to care that it was being flooded outside of all the systems. Now there are buildings on the arts campus. It was ground zero in 2008, and so when we talk about dance going into the museum building, for instance, so the museum building itself had about 4 inches of water in the 500-year flood level, in a 500-year flood event, with no protections from the riverside or any of the things we've built in now. So we're better protected, but it doesn't mean that water won't come back. One of the reasons dance is acceptable, as opposed to research or other things we would do, is not to be too flippant about dance, but they can sort of just dance out of the building. There are floor systems. We have to take systems like we did in the theater building, 1937 building. You can see the floor we built. It's in white. You can see the floor we built above on the top of the theater building. That now hosts all of the mechanical and electrical systems. They used to be pre-2008 in the basement. The building was dead as soon as the water entered into that. That building is too close to the river to promise it will not get wet again, so we took all mechanical and electrical systems and put them up. The same thing will happen with mechanical and electrical systems in 2 buildings, the museum as well as the original art building. We'll take them up. Now, the original art building, they had some thinking going on there. The lower level was inundated. The main level of the original 1936 art building did not get hit by the flood, because when they built it 5 feet above the level they had created in what was called the 1933 Iowa Improvement Project, Iowa River Improvement Project, which created a great levee on the west side. And at the time, everybody thought, we'll be free from flooding. We're not. So it's an inexact science to promise that we won't. But we have 7 miles of HESCO barriers, those big 4x4 baskets. We have 7 miles of those in storage for our campus. HESCO is a Louisiana company. We are, and I don't mean this facetiously, we're the Midwest distributor for HESCO. If there are floods on the Missouri or on the Mississippi and we're not in danger, we ship them in half a day to them. And then immediately HESCO ships us a new 7 miles. And we have those, and that's enough to put an additional 8 feet of wall on those river walks that I talked about, to go 8 feet higher than the risks that have occurred in the past. So, John, it's a great observation and apparent. I've often said, after what we did following the flood, I'd love to stand on that wall and let the flood, but I don't want to let the flood come again. It sounds fun until it comes. So we'll be challenged by that again. The Corps has learned a lot. We work, thanks to our flood center in the College of Engineering, we work a lot with the Corps much more directly to make sure that they're wiser and we're wiser about how to manage the level in the reservoir, which is where the core of those issues are. It's not the local rain, it's the rain up in southern Minnesota that we care about with respect to the floods. It's a great question. Yes, please.
Lehnertz, building number 3.
Yes.
Hall.
Yes.
What are your plans for that?
Yeah, so the question was, what about building number 3 on the Pentecrest, McBride Hall? Beloved McBride Hall, which is the oldest university museum west of the Mississippi. It is our natural history building. It will always be our natural history building. We can't lie to that. We carved it all over the outside of it. And I can tell you, there are parties that say, come on, we are a different place now, a different time. This would be a university architect who would tie himself to the building if we do something other than that. That doesn't mean I'll be here forever. Now, I will say this. When we look, it has the largest on-campus classroom, McBride Auditorium, heavily used. We have underutilized portions of that building. Some of the facetious say, oh, you got all of these places for like zebras where I can see the bullet holes and things like that. For who? And the answer is usually third graders. Now, the argument there has been, well, it helps in recruiting those third graders to be Iowans. We have other ways to recruit them. I'm saying this as one sort of devil's advocate position. We have some elements of our natural history museum there that are truly historic. Liaison Islands, the cyclorama, and we have collections that are absolutely historic, and we need to maintain them and keep that as a treasure that we show. Whether we should be occupying all of that square footage as it is today is another question. The good thing is it's a question that's not being answered quite yet. We know that's the third, and even if we were fortunate enough to get all this state funding starting to roll, it wouldn't be before a decade before we'd be reviewing what we do with that building. And it will remain our natural history museum, and a building that supports the academics at the University of Iowa and the students at the University of Iowa. Because as much as we like all and care for all the people who come through that building for those various reasons, our first priority are the students that are coming to, learning, and then graduating from the University of Iowa. But it's a great observation, and it is one that won't be simple. I don't expect it. It'll all depend on the players and our study of what's happening. But I can tell you, tomorrow I've got a tour with Liz Crooks and the team from McBride. We're going to start an architectural tour of the Pentecrest, a plan for both trees and architecture. We're planning a program together with them, and I feel honored enough that they want me to be part of their team for that. So we continue to celebrate what that building means and what the other buildings on the Pentecrest mean for us.
What's your home ec was?
Home ec. Ask my mom. Ask Mary. They went to school there. In fact, I will say, my mom, who was a home ec teacher, I actually have fond memories. She probably, today it would be illegal. She was going to class and was sending my brother and I up to Mammal Hall to play around while she was in class. So my very, very first memories as a toddler were wandering around bears and alligators and zebras with bullet holes in them, and no parent. But it worked out. It worked. She was going to embarrass me tonight. I'm going to embarrass her. We don't have a home economics program anymore. Of course, we have anthropology is in the building. We have a lot of teaching. Yeah, we have some space we're not programming because we're getting ready for that 3-building move. All of the buildings, both Jessup, which we've also emptied some of Jessup, the floor below me is almost barren, because when we start McLean, we have to move math and others in, and math is actually going to go over to McBride during that interim. We're almost running out of time. I'll take a couple more questions, please.
As I was looking at some of these maps, I was curious to see, if possible, where all the married student housing barracks were. Once upon a time.
Question?
I used to
Yeah.
live in one,
Yeah.
which was then called Fun Park.
Mhm.
And they were in some amazing places.
Do you mean that as a compliment? So the question was about the barracks, post-World War II barracks that were all over this campus and community, and a lot of people had special memories of being residents at this campus, and we tilted up a lot of buildings fast on this campus because of the post-World War II bust on this campus and everywhere else. There's a Facebook page called something about I was born before 1999 in Iowa City. I don't know if any of you have seen it. It shows vintage photographs constantly, and every once in a while they'll show, the Hampshire site, the Kinnick site, all the different sites of the Quonset huts, and yeah, they were a special part of the university history. Okay, I'm going to take yours, and then I'm going to wrap it up.
What are you going to do, or what thought have you put into people walking, especially back and forth across the river, or maybe some other form of transportation than the bus or cars? What about light rail? Or a trolley?
Are you a plant?
Back and forth.
So, there are two ideas, one on this map and one not on this map, and what I've talked about. The question was about the pressure on CAM bus and pedestrians in this river that separates us, and half of our on-campus residents, first-year residents, living on the side of the river that their classes aren't on. And what do we do for transportation? Are we thinking in different ways? I don't want to reveal something that implicates me, but I have a really good partner who's a long-time career university architect for Colorado, and we've hired him to help me. As I said, I can do both vice president and university architect when there's a lot of work to do. So we work together on a lot of things, and we don't have time during the week to do it. So every once in a while we meet after work. And a very sort of historic moment, I hope it's historic, we went to George's for cheeseburgers and a couple of beers, and we put the campus map on a booth. We got a booth, got a campus map. The lighting's not very good at George's, but 2 beers in, I proposed 2 ideas. Number one was the idea to take advantage of several projects and a need and priority for the president by taking our cultural centers to the core of campus at Hubbard Park. The other was after our director of CAM bus and parking and transportation reports to me. Most of the non-academic units report up to me, but the director had said, we're almost at a red, it was right before COVID, so it cooled down for a bit, but it's coming back, this red zone for CAM bus and how we get people around our campus. And that night, and it's not on this map formally, but it's on our illustrative map for our master plan, is a SkyTrain from the West Campus residence halls to the far southern edge of the Pennacrest. And it would allow more than 50 buses a day of traffic to go in 45 seconds rather than 14 minutes from the west side to, and you'd have both options. Now, a lot of people say, you gotta be kidding me, Ron, are you a cartoonist, or you work for Disney? But there is a real cost benefit potential in this. When I talk about $500,000 per bus and 2-year wait, probably a $10 million building to house and care for those, the number of students you have to employ, because that's a student-run organization, the buses, to run those, there are 2 people at each end of that tram, and that's it. No power, no, I mean, it's like 1 kilowatt of energy a day per person. It's just electric. It doesn't have fuel. When we have an ice storm on our campus, CAM bus has to shut down. The nurses coming from Hawkeye, coming from the Finkbein lot, don't have a way to the hospital when that happens. These are ski lifts. They don't care about winter weather. So there's a real potential. I'm glad you brought it up. There's a potential. You're going to hear me keep on talking about the financial sustainability green benefits of it, and the connectivity. Right now, if you're a prospective student at the University of Iowa coming in as a senior from, let's say, Colorado, and you want to be a doctor, and a lot of our recruits come here because of our health sciences and want to be a doctor, our great students give their tour of the Pentecrest, because it's a walking tour, and they say, so you want to be a doctor? It's over there. And they point across the river. Can you imagine saying, well, how about you and your family hop on this Pentecrest tram and take us over there and look at the architecture of the river basin while you do it? I think our coolness factor would jump out of the roof. We have a ways to go to get people to jump to make that idea. I will say one other thing to your point on this. The Krandik, which is the railroad that kind of cuts into the middle of the campus, past the power plant and the library and the Union and College of Public Health and out to North Liberty, that's owned by Alliant Energy. We are now in conversations with the cities that are related to this, Iowa City, Coralville, North Liberty, about possibly purchase. It's very seldom used. And for the first time, nobody ever gives up railroads. For the first time, Alliant's talking about selling it. And if they did, a lot of ideas were more expensive than just letting it go. But a new idea is to take that pathway and take the rails off and create an automated busing system that simply connects dot to dot, no traffic, no pollution, you're over the top of it, and it could go all the way to Cedar Rapids Airport, Eastern Iowa Airport. But certainly to North Liberty, where we have Oakdale campus, where we have commuter parking there and research happening there, back to the campus with almost no in-betweens. Now, it's easy for me to talk about that. That's still a dream till something comes. But those are the kinds of ideas that are starting to emerge out of the increasingly urban context we have. We are just a little town in Iowa. We should have no problems, but you all know that's not true. And we are becoming more and more urban as time goes. It's a great observation of some of the challenges we do have. We are working hard on making a more pedestrian-friendly campus. One of the risks of that, we see at, for instance, Purdue, they made it so friendly that all the bikes started going on, and it's not the cars they're worried about, it's the silent killer, the bikes hitting people. They now have beautiful plazas with yellow lanes painted through it where the bikes go and humans go. There's a mix in there about having a bike-friendly, pedestrian-friendly, and yes, car-friendly. We have highways going through our campus for Iowa City. So we're not going to get rid of that, but we do have to look carefully at the pedestrian safety of our campus. It's a great question and observation about the urban context in which we exist. I'm going to get one more. I know you're all doing overtime. You're going to start charging me. Are you sure? Okay, one last thing. This is probably worth almost nothing. But I did have the honor, David Scorton asked John Scott and I to write a book about art architecture on our campus in 2006. Then, can you believe it, it sold out. It gave us an opportunity to write a second edition. I don't make any money on these. We did it for the Iowa Press, any of the proceeds. But we got to write a second edition after the flood. So it includes the story of the flood and the flood recovery and those. So I have one to give away. This is a simple quiz, I think. I'm not looking for the answer. I'm looking for a hand. First hand goes up gives me a chance to ask you the answer. And that's not fair. And if I think it's a false start, I'll call illegal procedure. 5-year penalty on you. So, on what date and year was the University of Iowa founded? Date and year. One right here, and then your number 2, John.
You have to have the exact date.
I want the exact date, month, and year. John?
July 14th, 1848.
No. Okay, there's one clue, 1847. Yes, sir?
February
God, that's close. So you've got the month. Now everybody's going to start yelling numbers. I want to see a hand up for a number.
15.
No. No.
7, 6.
No. Come on. What year, that one didn't work. What year was the flood? Which, yeah, okay, well that's no fair. All right, on what date did the flood crest in 2008 in Iowa City? What date? We're getting very close, I haven't heard it yet. No? No? Come on.
June 13th.
I've heard June 13 several times, it's close, but it's not it. No. Who said 15? Okay, fine. I thought this group would nail February 24th, 1847, but no, it's tougher than you think. Okay, everybody, thank you for coming tonight. This is your